Okay, so before I introduce our guest, I was in the city of McDonough the other day, and they brought up a question: what are the most successful communities in the state doing that you see a trend happening? And the conversation led to the communities that are doing the best are those that are incorporating the arts into their development plans. So we thought, why not bring in the best person to speak on this? So we brought in Tina Lilly, the Grants Program Director for the Georgia Council for the Arts, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. As Tommy said, I'm Tina Lilly with Georgia Council for the Arts. So today we're going to cover a few facts and figures about why the arts are important to economic development, and then move into ways that you can fund your arts projects and in your communities across the state.
Sorry, I got trigger happy.
No worries. So for you guys that are not familiar with Georgia Council for the Arts, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information. We are the state arts agency for Georgia, and we are a division of the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And our mission is to use the arts to create vibrant, thriving communities in the state. Now, we have quite a few programs, most of which we will not talk about today, but they range from arts education-based projects with schools to organizing exhibits of work by Georgia artists to travel in the state to sponsoring the annual Governor's Awards in the Arts and Humanities. Now, our website has info on all these programs, so if you're interested in finding out more, please feel free to contact me or any GCA staff member with questions. Now, sometimes when I talk about the arts, folks are thinking only of very classical forms of arts and putting on a tuxedo and going to the theater and very formal art forms. And other folks think about very strange and very weird things that may not mean anything. Now, that's both part of what we're talking about, but we're also talking about local crafts and music and theater and any sort of art form where people are making or creating. So think in really broad terms when we're talking today. So why are the arts important to economic development in a community? Well, I'm going to quickly go through some figures that reflect the huge impact that the arts have in the U.S. as well as here in Georgia. So first of all, the arts industry contributed $704 billion to the U.S. economy in 2013. Now, that $704 billion figure equates to about 4.2% of the GDP. Now, that's right above construction and transportation. There are more people in the U.S. working for nonprofit arts organizations than there are working as accountants, police officers, lawyers, or firefighters. The average person that attends an arts event spends more than $31 on top of the cost of tickets. And tourists spend almost twice as much as local folks when going to an arts event. So what do all these facts and figures actually mean to us here in Georgia? Well, for example, we're going to look at Columbia County. It's a rural county in the state, and in 2015, there were just under 1,600 people that attended arts events in 2015, and that's a small total number. However, those folks actually accounted for more than $44,000 in local spending on top of their ticket costs. So even just having a few events a year, drawing a small number of people, can have a significant impact in a community. Now, in a larger community like Augusta, almost 700,000 people attended arts events in 2015, and those folks were responsible for almost $20 million in local spending over and above ticket sales. Now, that local spending supported around 2,400 jobs and brought in more than $2.6 million for the local government. Another example is Toccoa. They renovated their historic downtown theater. So last year, the theater hosted 123 events, which brought more than 19,000 people to the downtown area. So renovating and opening the theater has been partially responsible for the addition of 36 new jobs in downtown that have been created since the renovation. Now, the arts create a ripple effect of benefits. So they create neighborhoods that are more lively, communities that are revitalized, and ones where tourists and residents are attracted. They also help create a more connected population where diverse groups of people come together and share experiences and perspectives, and I think help to understand each other a little bit better. So the moral of the story is that don't think of the arts as a dessert, as something that you do on your off time just for entertainment, and then you get back to your real work. Think of it as an important tool that's in your toolkit to do the work that you need to do in terms of community and economic development. So now we're going to move into grants that Georgia Council for the Arts offers that can help fund your arts programs and your arts ideas in the community. The GCA has 4 grant programs, and we are going to focus on 2 of those today, the Project Grant and the Vibrant Communities Grant. Now, if you want to know more about Partner and Arts Education, please feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to go over those in depth with you. Now, the Project and the Vibrant Communities grants are very similar. The key difference is who can apply for each of those, and we'll cover that shortly. Now, both of these grants will support an arts project or an arts event. Both are open to any type of nonprofit organization. It doesn't have to be an arts organization. Any government entity, any school or college. Now, the next round of project grants, the guidelines are available now, and the deadline is February 13th. So like I said, the big difference in Project and Vibrant Community grants is who can apply for each. So Project, Partner, and Arts Education deadlines will be coming up in February and March. And these grants will be announced in July. So once those grants are announced, then an eligible applicant that's in a county in which nobody received one of those GCA grants is then able to apply for Vibrant Communities. So most of the time that involves a lot of the rural counties across the state. Now, the Vibrant Community application is much shorter, and it's much easier than that of the Project Grant. It requires a smaller cash match, but there's a shorter time frame in which to complete the project. Also, you can request up to $7,000 through a Project Grant, but only $5,000 through a Vibrant Communities grant. Now, most of the time I get a lot of questions. Folks want to know which program should you apply for. So in my advice, if you are in a county that has lots of arts organizations that regularly apply to Georgia Council for the Arts, or if you have a project that you're determined to get funded, then I would say be on the safe side and apply for a project grant. If you're not funded, then you can use the same information that you've already pulled together and apply for a Vibrant Communities grant. Now, if you're in a very rural county, you don't know of organizations that are normally supported by Georgia Council for the Arts, then you might wait and apply for Vibrant Communities. And of course, if you have questions or doubts or not sure, give me a call and we can talk specifically about your community. Now, this is only a partial list of the types of projects that GCA can fund. It includes everything from performances and exhibits to murals and classes, residencies, commissions of artwork, all kinds of things like that. So the important element of a project is that it be arts-based and that it benefit the people in the community. Now, these are the types of projects that we do see sometimes in grants, but these things we can't cover because they're not arts related. These include history-related events, culinary events, or athletic events. And as always, if you're not sure about your event, contact me and we can talk about that. Now, our grants will cover both projects that utilize professional artists as well as community-based projects, such as exhibits by your local arts guild or community theater productions. The grant can cover most of the costs that you will have associated with arts events. It will cover artist fees, any marketing, any rental costs of equipment or facilities, any extra staff that you have to hire, and any of your marketing costs. Now, these are the things that our grants will not cover. This includes receptions, parties, prizes, programming that takes place out of Georgia, and any large capital expenses. So now it's fine if you want to have an event and have a reception after your event. We just can't cover the costs of those like receptions after your events. So we consider those ineligible. So the key to your application is to make sure you have enough eligible expenses in the budget for our grant to cover. Now, these are the criteria that we use to evaluate your applications. Now, as you can see, the one that's worth the most points is community impact. Now, that's because we're looking for projects that are going to benefit the people in the community that you serve. So that could be a certain neighborhood. It could be your entire city. It could be something as small as a particular school. It could be something as large as an entire region or the whole state of Georgia. Now, arts projects can benefit communities in a lot of different ways. Everything from attracting tourists to revitalizing a depressed area of downtown to utilizing new methods to teach students. So the list here only shows some examples. There are quite a few more. An impact can be reached by reaching a large number of people or a small number of people in a really meaningful way. We're not looking for one type of impact over another. The value of the project depends on your goals and your mission, as well as the needs of the people in your community. So the best applications that we see aren't worried about what GCA is looking for or what the panelists are looking for. The best applications have identified a need in their community, and they have a really strong arts plan to fill that need. Now, we hold our own online training webinars for each grant type. You'll hear some of the information you've heard today, but we'll go into a lot more detail about the requirements and about what tips for submitting a really successful application. So to register for any of the webinars that are coming up, go to the guidelines and follow the links for the specific grant type. The webinars will cover the requirements of each grant, our online application system, and tips for writing a successful proposal. And we'll also post recordings of those webinars on our website in case you can't participate in the live webinar. Now, these are the deadlines for each grant type, and the most immediate deadline is February 13th. That is for project and for partner grants, and then arts education is following on March 6th. Now, all of those three grants are announced in July. So once those are announced, that's when we let you know who's eligible to apply for Vibrant Communities and when that deadline will be. It will likely be in August.
Now, Tina, do these dates vary from year to year, or are they always kind of consistent?
They're fairly consistent. For example, Project and Partner is usually mid-February, around that time, with Arts Education following the next month and Vibrant Communities in August. Now, that being said, we are about to complete a new strategic plan, and then we'll reevaluate our grants program. So I anticipate that these will stay the same, but I can't say for sure.
Okay.
So that's it for now on GCA funding. But we are going to move into some other sources for arts funding for your project outside of Georgia Council for the Arts. Now, first is the Literary Event Grant of Georgia. That is through the Georgia Writers Association. And this organization, they give small grants. They're $50 to $250. But they're used for literary events such as readings, workshops from writers, presentations, things like that. They have an ongoing deadline, but it's probably good if you know you want to apply to go ahead and apply to them, just in case they get a lot of applications and their funds are committed for the year. So if you have something going on, I would go ahead and get in touch with them. Georgia Humanities. Now, they will not fund a lot of arts projects that GCA will fund, but sometimes there's overlap in your project. For instance, if you are doing an exhibit on your town's local history, and it involves artists interpreting local history, then there may be some overlap. They may be able to fund, as well as Georgia Council for the Arts. But as you can see, they fund things like film screenings with discussions, historic walking tours, things like that, living history programs. Some of you do cemetery tours and have people interpreting the characters in the cemetery, things like that. Now, they won't fund performing arts programs, art exhibits, things like that. But again, sometimes there's some overlap. They have 2 deadlines a year, March and September, and they have grants up to $2,000. South Arts. South Arts is a regional service organization. It supports artists and arts organizations in 9 states. They have quite a few grants. I've only listed 4, but they have a lot more. So, for instance, if you are a presenter, meaning that you present performing artists, they have a program called Launchpad. That is a series of classes and workshops that you will attend. It also includes a travel subsidy to attend their conference in Orlando, where you would view a lot of showcases from artists. You will go to classes about presenting, and it also includes the opportunity to receive funding to present a concert in your community. Performing arts touring grants will support conferences or performances by artists who reside within the South Arts 9-state service area. So if you want to bring in a musician, a theater company, a dance company, and that company is within the southern region, then this grant will help support that. The Traditional Arts Grant Program, they have funding that will bring a traditional artist and a scholar or a folklorist for a residency. Now, traditional artists are artists who've learned their craft as it's passed down from generation to generation. So it could include quilters, it could include self-taught painters, things like that. Their other grant program that I've included here is Literary Arts. Again, it is similar to the Georgia Writers Association, but this will support engagements by guest writers from outside your state. So it could be that you get a grant both from South Arts and Georgia Writers to do some sort of literary event. The Fox Theater Institute. This is part of the Fox Theater in Atlanta. Now, they have multiple programs that support historic theaters across the state. And their grant program will support studies that you need to do, perhaps to see if your building can be restored and how it might be used. They will support the preservation or renovation of a historic theater. They offer technical assistance. For instance, if you need to buy lighting or sound equipment for your space. And they also have grants for emergencies for historic theaters. If you have a flood, if lightning hits your facility. And their emergency grants don't require a match. So that is an incredible resource if you have a historic theater. The Averett is an example of an organization that recently received funding from the Fox Institute. They are doing lighting upgrades to their theater. IMLS. the Institute for Museum and Library Services. Now, this is a national organization, and they have a lot of grant programs for museums, historical societies, libraries, and for local governments. One grant I want to point out, or two actually, the Museum Assessment Program and Collections Assessment Program. Now, those aren't actually grants. What you do is apply for your organization, and if you receive support, then they will pay for a consultant to come into your museum and look at either what you need to do administratively or how you can better care for your collections. So a lot of local historical societies have a lot of objects, but maybe you're not quite sure how to take care of them or how to preserve paper and cloth and things like that to make sure that it doesn't disintegrate into the future. So that's a really great resource to have someone come in and tell you exactly what you need to do. The Museums for America program, MFA, is up to $500,000. And this, as they say, supports projects that strengthen the ability of an individual museum to serve its public. So that's really broad. And on their website, they have examples of folks, funds that they have, projects they have supported in the past. Another one that I've noted is the museum grants for African American history and culture. These are specifically for museums that focus on African American history and art in the U.S. And an example, the Tubman Museum just received $57,000 to build institutional capacity and effectiveness by hiring and training an education coordinator. So that's another resource. They, again, have a ton of different grant programs. I've only featured 4 here, so you might take a look at their website. They also do fund local governments, so you're not excluded if your city has artifacts or collections. The National Endowment for the Humanities. Again, they have a ton of programs. I have listed a couple here. Common Heritage. This supports the digitization of cultural heritage material and outreach through your community's events that interpret those materials. The Creating Humanities Communities program supports humanities activities that are partnerships with more than 2 institutions. The Preservation Assistance Grants, they are specifically for small and mid-sized organizations, and they improve your ability to preserve and care for your humanities collections. So that's a really good grant for local historical societies or cities that have lots of historical artifacts. Sustaining cultural heritage collections, that helps, again, if you have a really large collection of materials, and that helps with the ability to anticipate natural disasters. The Conyers Rockdale Library just received one of those grants for $11,000. What they are doing is a digitization event. They're asking folks to bring in heritage materials from their local African American churches, and then they're going to digitize those. So that's an example of what they did and what they're going to do with that funding. National Endowment for the Arts. Again, a number of grants programs. So I've really focused on 2 that I think you would be most interested in. Challenge America is the one that I normally tell, especially rural arts organizations, to focus on. This is for small and mid-sized organizations that extend the reach of the arts to underserved populations. So especially you guys in rural communities, that's one you should focus on. Also, the NEA uses that grant to make sure that they get money into every congressional district in the United States. So they are looking for organizations outside of Atlanta to fund. So if you have thought that, we're too small for National Endowment for the Art, no, they really are looking for you guys to apply. The other grant that you should look at is Our Town. This is specifically for creative placemaking projects. It requires a partnership between an arts organization and local government. They have also, if you want ideas, they have an incredible online library of all of the projects that they have funded, how they have benefited the local communities, how they funded it, who the partners were, what was successful, what wasn't successful, what they learned from it. So that website is a really great place to go for inspiration. An example of a project in Georgia that was funded, the Clarkston Community Center, which is right outside Atlanta. They received funding from Our Town to start an entrepreneurship program for the refugees that were in the area, to learn to take their local arts and crafts that they do and actually turn them into successful businesses here in the States. ArtPlace. ArtPlace also funds creative placemaking projects, just like the NEA Our Town grant. Like it says, it will fund projects that use the arts to tackle some sort of local challenge. They also have a really great database of all of the projects that they have funded. It's a great place to go for inspiration. Paradise Garden up in Somerville, which is a place that was created by artist Howard Finster. They received a significant ArtPlace grant that went towards restoration of that and projects that involved local government and local community, so that they're working together to benefit the community in Somerville. So another idea is USDA. Some folks don't think of USDA in terms of supporting the arts, but they are very supportive and anxious to support projects that will help rural communities. And sometimes that does involve setting up art centers, restoring theaters, things like that. The President Theater in Manchester received a USDA grant. They are in the middle of their restoration, and they hope to open very soon. And so that's a great resource. You should check with your regional USDA representative to talk about your project and see what they may be interested in funding. So a couple organizations that aren't funders, but you might use in terms of research for either your projects or projects that organizations in your community are undertaking. The Georgia Center for Nonprofits, they have classes on all types of nonprofit management, from bringing in board members, to writing a fundraising plan, to writing a marketing plan. They also have a bank of consultants for nonprofits. So that is a great resource for any of your local nonprofits. Some classes are live here in Atlanta, some are in person in Savannah, and some are online. The Foundation Center. The Foundation Center also has classes and workshops, but those are specifically geared towards fundraising. So if any of your local, again, historical societies, arts organizations need help, don't know how to find foundation funders, that's a great resource. You can also go to their website and you can look up all sorts of foundations online and look at their 990 tax forms, which will tell you everyone they have funded in the past year, how much they funded, so you get a sense of what they're looking for. Finally, Georgia Lawyers for the Arts. This is an organization. They have workshops on legal issues, both for artists and for organizations. They do a monthly workshop on how to start your own nonprofit organization. They do things like copyright. They do workshops on working with artists, how you do that, what the issues might be. They also have tons of resources on their website, such as templates if you wanted to hire an artist, for instance, to do a mural. They have examples of things like that. Most of their work is pro bono if it's an arts project. So that's a great resource for individual artists as well as arts organizations. And this is, again, not a funder, but just something I wanted you to be aware of. There will be a conference in Chattanooga, March 15th and 16th. It is specifically focused on creative placemaking in small southern towns and rural communities. The registration is only $200. They have an early bird deadline, which makes it $150. And we, GCA, is in the process of working with South Arts to offer some scholarships to this, which would cover your registration, your transportation, your lodging, and your food. So they'll probably be about $500. So this is the information on the conference. And as soon as we get the info about the scholarships and how that's going to work, we'll post it on GCA's website. We'll send it over to the folks here, and it'll also be posted on the South Arts website. So that should be coming up pretty soon. But I would really encourage you to attend and spend 2 days just talking about using the arts in rural communities. I think it's going to be really interesting. So that is what I have, and we were going to open up at this point for any questions that you have about GCA's funding sources, about other funding sources, about examples of other folks that have used the arts in terms of community development. Anything you have, we will take a stab at answering.
So I just wanted to say thanks to Tina again for coming over and doing this. And now I guess you guys can see why we brought her over, because
oh my God,
you learn something new every day in the world of downtown development, economic development. And if you're not incorporating the arts into what you're doing at this point in time, it'd be a great time to get that started, because the communities, especially the trend of millennials and people who are moving to places they want to be. And they are moving where there's something more than just an opportunity to work and go home and go to sleep. They want to be engaged in the community. And what I noticed as we were going through the images, every one of them kind of brings about some excitement. So, you know, it's just good to go ahead and start looking at those things so you can incorporate them in a plan.
Yeah, and I feel like everybody always talks about there's no money to do stuff. I mean, you can't argue. I mean, you you listed a ton of not only like local state resources, but federal resources that are available to help make these projects come to life.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Can a lot of these programs be layered in funding?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For instance, we see it all the time. You could match a Georgia Council for the Arts grant with a Georgia Humanities grant or with a grant from South Arts. Absolutely. You could do something like if you got a Georgia Council for the Arts grant, and then perhaps you are charging admission, or you're, having local memberships or donations. Yes, absolutely, you can layer one on the other. And if you are very creative, then there's certainly a way to, through grants, to pay for these things without using up local resources. So absolutely.
And that's fantastic. And I think, so when I was in a local community, I always applied for these grants. But the good news is, when you reach out to these organizations, a lot of times they'll give you, these are the things we've funded in the past. And I wouldn't suggest building a program that way by looking at, something somebody else has done, but it will give you the inspiration. And maybe you can, if you have a program already in place and you're thinking, how can I pay for this? Or it's an idea and you want to bring it to reality. There's some good advice, and it also shows you the structure of how to put together the application so it can be funded. Mm-hmm. So we got a couple questions here.
First off, Tina, Connie says, great job, good webinar. Great information, which I love hearing that.
Thank you,
from
Connie.
A manager like Connie who, has so much experience and expertise. So to be able to, feel like Connie's taking something away, that makes me feel good.
Good. I'm glad it was helpful.
So first question, how do we find out if there's an arts organization in the community, or if they've already applied for a project grant or a Vibrant Communities grant?
You are welcome to call or email me, and I can let you know. On our website, there should be a list of organizations that received grants last year, or you can request that from me. If you're not aware of them, there may not be anybody in your community.
So if somebody in the community applied and they weren't aware of it, the Main Street manager wasn't aware of it, and they applied, would that disqualify them, or does that just make them competitive against that other organization?
Yeah, there's no limit on the number of grants we can give in a community.
Okay.
So it's all based on the quality of the application. So, yeah, if there are 10 organizations in a county that apply for project grants, there may be 10 grants in that community, and that's fine. The only thing it would disqualify is that if there are 10 applications and one of those organizations does receive a project grant, then you couldn't apply for Vibrant Communities. Mm-hmm. So that's the only thing.
Okay.
So I would say definitely if you have a project you really want funded, or you think there are other organizations that may apply for a project grant, I would say definitely go ahead and do that. But you can always shoot me an email or call me, and I'll let you know, yes, we receive grant applications every year from Carrollton, for example, and they're usually funded. Or no, we very rarely receive an application from Union County.
So basically, you're really competing against yourself. The best project you can put forward and the most creative way of doing it.
Yeah, and we fund information I did not include. When you submit an application, we put you in panels based on the budget size of your organization. So that means that if you're very small, you're in a panel with other very small organizations. And we're asking the panel to look at the quality of the project. Does it benefit that community? And if it does, we fund organizations that are all volunteer. that have no annual budget, or from tiny places, as well as the really large organizations. So, no, we fund all kind of organizations and projects.
Good to know.
So, I have a question for you, too.
Yes.
Are you guys, so you're part of the Georgia Department of Economic Development.
Mm-hmm.
So your funding, does that come from the state?
It's approximately half and half, half from the state, half from the National Endowment for the Arts.
Okay.
So it varies a little bit each year, but that's roughly it.
What is, like, in general, the amount of awards you give out in a year? Like, if you're looking at the total impact, what does that usually look like?
Total grants are roughly around $1.2 million. So, unfortunately, we have more good projects that apply than we can fund.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we would love to fund many, many more than we do. But it's approximately $1.2 million.
But at 5,000 to 7,000 a project, and you're talking $1.2 million. That's a lot of projects.
That's a lot of projects.
Yeah. We try very hard to get into all areas of the state, to fund all different types of projects. And as you said, we can definitely share examples of projects that have been funded that you can use, both in terms of applying to GCA, but also just for inspiration of how did they fund it, how did they put it together, who partnered on it, things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like
I have another question.
Is there a grant or funding source for restoration of a building becoming a theater, but was not originally a theater?
Those are tough. You can look at National Endowment for the Arts and Art Place. Now, those require partnerships with local government and other local organizations. If you're in Hapeville, did they say?
Yep.
I would look at the Atlanta Community Foundation, and also look at the Woodruff Foundation, and that's separate from the Woodruff Arts Center. But they do fund capital projects, and they do fund arts organizations. But yeah, capital money is difficult. I'm trying to think of another source. I might have one or two other ideas, but I would have to do a little research. If you send me an email and remind me, then I'll look up a couple others and see if those might be options.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tina.
Oh, thank you.
Looks like we answered, a lot of stuff, so we don't have a lot of questions. But we appreciate you being here with us and taking this time. I learned a lot.
I'm always learning something new. That's why I like hanging around Tina. She does a lot of
I learned from you guys.
I think it's great whenever, we can take something away. So we appreciate you being with us.
Okay.
And we will see you guys next time.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, somebody. We'll get them.